The gunshot echoed across the plains like thunder as Hannah Keller clutched her baby boy tighter to her chest, her heart pounding with each mile the horse carried them away from Thornfield. April 1876 had brought nothing but grief since her husband's murder 3 weeks ago, leaving her widowed at 22 with a 6-month-old son and a price on her head for a crime she didn't commit. "Just a bit further, James," Hannah whispered to her fussing infant, kissing his soft forehead as the Arizona Territory's unforgiving sun beat down on them. The horse beneath her, stolen out of desperate necessity, was beginning to falter after nearly 2 days of hard riding. She knew they couldn't continue much longer without rest, water, and shelter from the approaching night. Hannah's once fine dress was torn and dusty, her blonde hair falling loose from its pins. The small bundle of possessions tied behind her saddle contained all that remained of her former life: a few clothes, her wedding band, a photograph of her late husband Thomas, and what little money she had managed to grab before fleeing. On the horizon, she spotted a small creek cutting through the landscape, lined with cottonwoods. Relief washed over her parched lips. "Water, James. We'll rest there." The promise of respite gave her strength to urge the exhausted mare forward. As they approached the creek, Hannah's trained eyes scanned for signs of danger, a habit Thomas had taught her in their brief marriage. The territory was lawless in places, with outlaws, renegades, and those who might recognize her from the wanted posters that had surely been distributed by now. When she was certain they were alone, Hannah dismounted carefully, cradling James against her chest with one arm while leading the horse to water with her free hand. The mare drank eagerly as Hannah found a relatively comfortable spot beneath a cottonwood. She settled there, loosening her blouse to nurse her hungry child. "What are we going to do?" she whispered to the baby, who gazed up at her with Thomas's deep brown eyes. "We can't keep running forever." The plan had been to reach California, where Thomas's cousin lived, but that was still hundreds of miles away, and her supplies would not last. The sound of approaching hoofbeats sent panic surging through her veins. Hannah quickly covered herself, pulling James from his feeding. She had no weapons save a small knife tucked in her boot, hardly enough to defend against whoever was approaching. "Stay quiet, my love," she whispered, searching frantically for a place to hide. But it was too late. A lone rider had already spotted her, his tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun as he approached at a steady pace. Hannah stood her ground, clutching James protectively. She wouldn't run, couldn't run. Her legs trembled beneath her skirts, but her voice was steady when she called out, "That's far enough, stranger." The rider slowed his paint horse, raising his hands to show they were empty. "Don't mean no harm, madam." His voice carried a hint of Texas in its drawl. As he came closer, Hannah could see he was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 25 or 26, with sun-browned skin and piercing blue eyes beneath the brim of his worn Stetson. "Name's Isaac Mackley," he said, remaining in his saddle but keeping his distance. "Was just heading back to my camp when I spotted your horse." His gaze took in her disheveled appearance, the exhausted mare, and the baby clutched tightly to her chest. Something in his expression softened. "Looks like you two have been riding hard." Hannah said nothing, weighing her options. This man could be a bounty hunter, could be working for the Thornfield sheriff, or could be just what he claimed a cowboy happening upon their path. "I've got a camp set up about a mile from here," Isaac continued, gesturing vaguely westward. "Coffee's hot, and I've got beans and bacon to spare." He paused, seeming to recognize her hesitation. "You're welcome to join me, or I can ride on. Your choice, madam." The sun was sinking fast now, painting the Arizona sky in brilliant reds and golds. Soon it would be dark, and the desert night would turn cold. James was already fussing again, hungry and uncomfortable. Hannah made her decision. "My name is Hannah," she said, deliberately omitting her surname. "And this is James." Isaac nodded, a small smile touching his lips. "Pleased to meet you both. If you'll allow me, I can lead the way to camp. Your horse looks about done in." "I can manage," Hannah replied, already moving to remount. Every instinct told her to be cautious, but hunger and exhaustion were powerful motivators. Besides, if this man meant them harm, he could have acted already. They rode in silence, Hannah keeping a careful distance behind Isaac. As they crested a small rise, she saw the flicker of a campfire in a sheltered hollow. It looked inviting, safe even. Isaac had chosen the spot well, hidden from casual view, but with clear sight lines in all directions. His camp was simple but orderly. A small tent was pitched against the base of a rock formation, a fire burned steadily in a ring of stones, and his provisions were neatly arranged nearby. A coffee pot sat at the edge of the fire, the rich aroma making Hannah's empty stomach growl audibly. "Go ahead and sit," Isaac said, dismounting and gesturing to a log positioned near the fire. "I'll see to the horses." Hannah hesitated but finally settled on the log, adjusting James in her arms. She watched carefully as Isaac efficiently unsaddled both horses, rubbed them down with handfuls of grass, and tethered them where they could graze on the sparse vegetation. "Been on the trail long?" he asked casually as he returned to the fire, pouring coffee into a tin cup and offering it to her. Hannah accepted the cup with one hand, balancing James on her knee. "Long enough," Isaac nodded, not pressing further. He stirred the pot of beans hanging over the fire, added more wood to the flames, then settled across from her. In the firelight, Hannah could see him better. The laugh lines around his eyes, the scar running along his jawline, the way he moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to caring for himself. "That's a fine boy you have there," Isaac commented, nodding toward James, who had finally quieted, his eyes heavy with impending sleep. "Thank you," Hannah replied, sipping the strong coffee. It was the best thing she'd tasted in days. "He's usually better behaved, but we've had a difficult journey." Isaac served her a plate of beans and bacon, then prepared one for himself. "Where you headed?" Hannah considered lying but settled on a partial truth. "California, I have family there." "California's a long way from here, especially traveling alone with a young one." Isaac's tone wasn't judgmental, merely stating a fact. "We'll manage." Hannah's voice was firmer than she felt. The food was reviving her body, but her mind remained alert, cautious. They ate in silence for a while, the crackle of the fire and occasional whicker from the horses, the only sounds disturbing the desert night. James had fallen asleep against her chest, his small face peaceful for the first time in days. "If you'd like," Isaac finally said, "I can make up a pallet for you and the boy in my tent. I'll sleep out here by the fire." Hannah stiffened. "That's very kind, but—" "No obligations," Isaac interrupted, seeming to understand her concern. "Just offering shelter. Gets cold out here at night, especially for little ones." Hannah looked down at James, his cheeks flushed with sleep. She was exhausted, and the thought of a relatively safe place to lie down was tempting. Still, she hesitated. "I won't ask your business, madam," Isaac said quietly. "Everyone out here's running to or from something. I'm just offering a night's rest before you continue your journey." Something in his tone, honest, straightforward, made Hannah's decision. "Thank you, Mr. Mackley." "Isaac," he corrected with a small smile. "Isaac," she echoed. True to his word, Isaac prepared the tent for her and James, laying out clean blankets and even providing an extra shirt of his to serve as a pillow. Hannah settled James carefully on the makeshift bed, then sat beside him, unwilling to sleep just yet despite her exhaustion. Through the tent's open flap, she watched Isaac move around the camp, securing things for the night, checking the horses one last time, then settling on his bedroll near the fire. He removed his hat, revealing thick brown hair that curled slightly at the ends, before lying back to gaze at the stars. Hannah didn't realize she had fallen asleep until she woke with a start, her heart racing from a nightmare she couldn't quite remember. James still slept peacefully beside her. Outside, the fire had burned low, and Isaac's form was a dark shape against the glowing embers. For the first time in weeks, Hannah allowed herself to relax just a little. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for tonight at least they were safe. Morning came with the soft cooing of mourning doves and the scent of coffee. Hannah emerged from the tent with James in her arms to find Isaac already up, tending the fire and preparing a simple breakfast of leftover beans and Johnny cakes. "Morning," he greeted her with a nod. "Sleep well?" "Better than I have in some time," Hannah admitted, settling by the fire. "Thank you." Isaac simply nodded again, handing her a cup of coffee before turning his attention to James, who was now wide awake and staring at the stranger with curious eyes. "He's a handsome boy," Isaac commented. "Got your eyes." Hannah smiled despite herself. "His father's chin, though." Isaac glanced at her briefly, noting the past tense but didn't pry. Instead, he offered a Johnny cake to James, who grabbed at it with pudgy fingers. "He's just starting on solid foods," Hannah explained, breaking the cake into smaller pieces for the baby, "though he still nurses mostly." They ate in companionable silence, the morning sun warming the chill from the air. Hannah found herself studying Isaac when he wasn't looking the way he moved with practiced efficiency, the gentleness in his hands when he offered food to James, the thoughtfulness in his blue eyes. "I need to head into Yuma for supplies," Isaac said eventually, collecting their empty plates. "Planned to leave yesterday, but—" he gestured vaguely, implying their unexpected meeting had changed his plans. "We've delayed you. I'm sorry," Hannah said, feeling a pang of guilt. Isaac shook his head. "No need for apologies. Was a pleasant change, having company." He hesitated, then added, "You're welcome to ride along if you like. Yuma's got a stage to California, if that's still your plan." Hannah tensed. Yuma meant people, questions, potential recognition. "I don't think that would be wise." Isaac's gaze sharpened slightly. "Trouble following you?" "You said you wouldn't ask my business," Hannah reminded him, her voice cooler than intended. "Fair enough." Isaac stood, dusting off his pants. "Offer stands either way. I'll be back by nightfall if you'd rather wait here." Hannah considered her options. The camp was well hidden, and her horse needed more rest before continuing. James was comfortable, and they had shelter. Still, staying meant trusting Isaac further, and trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. "I appreciate your hospitality," she said carefully, "but we should move on today." Isaac nodded, unsurprised. "At least let me give you provisions. Got extra beans, coffee, jerky, enough to see you through a few days." His generosity caught Hannah off guard. "Why would you help us? You don't know me." Isaac's expression softened as he glanced at James. "I know enough. You're a mother protecting her child. That's reason enough for me." He paused, then added quietly, "My own mama did the same for me, once upon a time." There was a story there, Hannah sensed, but she didn't press. Instead, she nodded her acceptance of his offer. While Isaac packed supplies for her, Hannah nursed James and pondered her next move. California was still the safest option, but without funds for stage passage, the journey would be long and dangerous. Perhaps she could find work somewhere along the way. She was educated, could handle figures, had even helped Thomas with his business correspondence. "Thinking hard?" Isaac's voice interrupted her thoughts as he approached with a bulging saddlebag. "Just planning," Hannah replied, adjusting her clothing as James finished nursing. Isaac set the saddlebag down, then crouched to be at eye level with her. "Look, I don't mean to pry, but the territory's dangerous for a woman alone, especially with a child. If you're in some kind of trouble—" "I'm not your responsibility," Hannah said firmly. "Never said you were." Isaac's voice remained gentle. "But sometimes folks need help is all. No shame in that." Hannah stared at him, trying to gauge his intentions. Everything about him, from the steadiness of his gaze to the calluses on his hands, spoke of a man who worked hard and lived honestly. But she had been wrong about people before. "My husband was murdered," she found herself saying, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. 3 weeks ago in Thornfield. They think I did it." Isaac's expression didn't change, save for a slight tightening around his eyes. "Did you?" "No." Hannah's voice was sharp with indignation. "Thomas was everything to me. We were happy." Isaac nodded once, accepting her word. "What happened?" Hannah hesitated, but the need to share her burden with anyone, was overwhelming. "Thomas owned the mercantile in Thornfield. He was staying late to do the accounts when someone broke in. The sheriff found him the next morning, shot through the heart." Her voice faltered. "There was money missing from the safe, and his ledger showed discrepancies. The sheriff decided I had been stealing from the business, that Thomas discovered it, and that I killed him to cover it up." "But you didn't." Isaac stated, not a question. Of course not. The discrepancies were from Thomas extending credit to miners who'd fallen on hard times. He kept a separate record of it, but the sheriff wouldn't listen. He was already writing to the territorial governor for a hanging order when our housekeeper warned me. I took James and ran that night. Isaac was silent for a long moment, processing her story. Finally, he asked, "The Sheriff Wilcox?" Hannah's eyes widened. "You know him?" "Know of him," Isaac corrected grimly. "Has a reputation for finding convenient solutions to complicated problems." "Then you understand why we can't go to Yuma," Hannah said. "There are likely wanted posters by now." Isaac nodded slowly. "Changes things." He seemed to be thinking, his gaze distant. After a moment, he focused on her again. "I've got a small place about 30 miles north of here. Nothing fancy, just a cabin and some land I'm working. You'd be safe there while I make inquiries." "Inquiries?" Hannah repeated, uncertain. "About what really happened to your husband," Isaac explained. "Might be someone in Thornfield knows something. Sheriff Wilcox isn't the type to dig too deep if he's already decided who's guilty." Hope, fragile but persistent, bloomed in Hannah's chest. "Why would you do this for us?" Isaac's expression turned solemn. "Because 10 years ago, my pa was accused of a crime he didn't commit. No one believed him except my mama and me. They hanged him anyway." He paused, a muscle working in his jaw. "Justice is hard to come by out here, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be sought." Hannah looked down at James, sleeping again in her arms. The prospect of proving her innocence, of not having to run forever, was almost too much to hope for. "I can't ask this of you." "You didn't ask. I offered." Isaac stood, extending his hand to her. "What do you say?" Hannah looked from his offered hand to his face, searching for any sign of deception. Finding none, she made her decision. "We accept your help," she said, taking his hand. Isaac's cabin turned out to be a sturdy, if modest, structure nestled at the edge of a small valley with a spring-fed creek running through it. A corral housed several horses, and a small garden plot showed signs of recent planting. It was clear Isaac had been building something here, a life, perhaps, or at least the beginnings of one. "It's not much," he said as they dismounted in front of the cabin, "but it's solid and dry." "It's wonderful," Hannah replied honestly, taking in the peaceful setting. After nearly 3 days of riding, with stops only when necessary for James's sake, the sight of a proper shelter was deeply welcome. The interior of the cabin was simple but clean. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a rough-hewn table and chairs nearby. A bed stood in one corner, with a small trunk at its foot. Shelves held provisions, books, and a few personal items. "You can have the bed," Isaac said, setting down their bags. "I'll bunk in the lean-to out back where I keep my tack." Hannah started to protest, but exhaustion won out. "Thank you. We'll try not to impose for long." Isaac busied himself lighting the fire and putting coffee on to boil, while Hannah settled James on the bed, surrounding him with pillows to prevent him from rolling off. The baby was awake and curious, kicking his legs and cooing at the new surroundings. "He seems to be handling the journey well," Isaac commented, watching as James grabbed at his own toes. Hannah smiled, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "He's resilient. Takes after his father that way." "And his mother, I'd wager," Isaac said, returning her smile before turning back to his tasks. As Isaac prepared a simple meal of beans, bacon, and biscuits, Hannah took stock of their situation. They were safer here than on the trail, certainly, but still fugitives in the eyes of the law. And while Isaac seemed trustworthy, she had only known him for days. His offer to investigate Thomas's murder seemed almost too good to be true. "You're wondering if you've made a mistake, trusting me," Isaac said quietly, setting a plate of food before her. His perception startled her. "Wouldn't you in my position?" Hannah countered. Isaac considered this as he sat across from her. "I would, and I'd keep a knife handy just in case." His eyes flicked briefly to her boot, where he'd no doubt noticed the outline of her blade. Hannah felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I'm not ungrateful." "No need to explain," Isaac interrupted gently. "Caution keeps folks alive out here. I respect that." They ate in silence for a while, the only sounds James's occasional babbling and the crackle of the fire. Despite her wariness, Hannah found herself relaxing as the meal progressed. There was something comforting about Isaac's presence, steady, undemanding, yet protective. "I'll ride for Thornfield tomorrow," Isaac said as they finished eating. "It's about 2 days' hard ride each way, so I'll be gone close to a week, maybe more if I need to ask around carefully." Hannah nodded, feeling a flutter of anxiety at the thought of being left alone. "What should I do if someone comes by?" "Unlikely," Isaac assured her. "Nearest neighbor's 10 miles south, and he rarely visits. Still, keep the door barred at night, and there's a shotgun above the fireplace if you need it." He hesitated, then added, "If you decide to leave while I'm gone, no hard feelings. Just leave me a note so I don't worry." His consideration touched Hannah. "We'll be here," she promised. "And thank you, Isaac. I know you're taking a risk for us." Isaac's expression softened. "Get some rest, Hannah. Tomorrow comes early." True to his word, Isaac was up before dawn, preparing for his journey. Hannah rose to see him off, James still sleeping peacefully on the bed. In the gray light of early morning, Isaac looked more serious, the task ahead weighing on him. "I've left plenty of provisions," he said, checking his saddlebags one final time. "Water's fresh from the spring, and there's a small smokehouse out back with some venison if you run low on meat." Hannah nodded, pulling her shawl tighter against the morning chill. "We'll manage fine." Isaac mounted his paint horse, looking down at her with an unreadable expression. "Be careful, Hannah. Trust your instincts." "You too," she replied softly. "And thank you again. For everything." With a nod and a touch to the brim of his hat, Isaac turned his horse and rode out, soon disappearing into the lightening landscape. Hannah watched until he was gone, then returned to the cabin, barring the door behind her. The days passed slowly. Hannah fell into a routine of caring for James, tending the small garden, and keeping the cabin in order. She discovered Isaac's small collection of books, a few dime novels, a well-worn Bible, a manual on horse breeding, and surprisingly, a volume of Shakespeare's sonnets. The last showed the most wear, with certain pages dog-eared and passages underlined in pencil. In the evenings, after James was asleep, Hannah would read by firelight, finding comfort in the familiar words. She wondered about Isaac, what had brought him to this remote place, why he lived alone, what dreams he might harbor behind his reserved exterior. The sonnet he had marked most heavily was the one beginning, "Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments," and she found herself rereading it often, hearing the words in his steady voice. On the 4th day, Hannah ventured to explore the property more thoroughly. The garden was well tended, with neat rows of vegetables that would yield a good harvest come summer. Beyond it, she discovered a small orchard of young apple trees, carefully fenced to protect them from wildlife. Near the creek, Isaac had constructed a crude bathing shelter, offering privacy for washing. It was clear that Isaac was building something permanent here, not just a place to stay, but a home. The realization made Hannah pause, reminded of the dreams she and Thomas had shared for their future. Dreams now shattered, leaving her with an uncertain path ahead. That night, as she sat by the fire with James sleeping in her lap, Hannah allowed herself to weep for the first time since Thomas's death. She cried for her lost husband, for their broken plans, for the fear and uncertainty that had become her constant companions. When James stirred at her tears, she hushed him gently, wiping her face. "We'll be all right," she whispered to him, a promise she desperately wanted to believe. "Somehow we'll find our way forward." The 6th day dawned with dark clouds gathering on the horizon. By mid-morning, rain was falling steadily, turning the yard to mud and drumming on the cabin roof. Hannah stoked the fire higher to combat the dampness and hung James's freshly washed clothes near the hearth to dry. The sound of hoofbeats in the afternoon came as a surprise. Hannah quickly placed James in a makeshift cradle of blankets, then reached for the shotgun above the fireplace. Her heart raced as she positioned herself near the window, peering cautiously through the rain. Relief flooded her when she recognized Isaac's broad-shouldered figure on the paint horse, though he was slumped forward more than usual, as if weary or injured. Hannah set the shotgun aside and unbarred the door, stepping onto the porch as Isaac rode into the yard. "You're back early," she called over the rain, then faltered as she got a better look at him. "Isaac." He was pale beneath his tan, and as he dismounted, she saw he was favoring his left side. "Got what I came for," he said grimly, leading his horse to the lean-to. "Let me see to my horse, then I'll explain." Hannah hurried back inside to put water on for coffee, concern gnawing at her. When Isaac finally entered the cabin, rainwater dripping from his coat, she gasped at the sight of blood staining his left sleeve. "You're hurt," she said, moving quickly to help him remove his wet coat. "It's not bad," Isaac assured her, though his tight expression belied his words. "Bullet just grazed me." "Bullet?" Hannah echoed, her concern deepening. "What happened in Thornfield?" Isaac sank into a chair near the fire, extending his hands toward the warmth. "Found some answers. Not all good ones, I'm afraid." Hannah brought him coffee, then retrieved her sewing basket. "Let me see your arm while you talk." Isaac submitted to her ministrations with stoic silence as she cut away his bloody shirt sleeve to reveal an angry furrow across his upper arm. The wound had stopped bleeding, but looked raw and painful. "It needs cleaning," Hannah murmured, gathering water and clean rags. Isaac nodded, then began his account. "Arrived in Thornfield 3 days ago. Kept a low profile, just another cowboy passing through. Started asking questions casual, like at the saloon, the livery, places where men talk freely." Hannah worked gently to clean his wound as he spoke, wincing in sympathy when he flinched. Didn't take long to learn that Sheriff Wilcox and his deputy Jensen had been running their own operation for years, skimming from businesses, extorting protection money, that sort of thing. "Your husband refused to pay." Hannah's hands stilled. "Thomas was killed because he wouldn't be intimidated?" Isaac's expression was grave. "That's part of it. But there's more. Found your housekeeper, Mrs. Rivera. She told me Thomas had been gathering evidence against Wilcox and Jensen, receipts, witness statements, a letter he planned to send to the territorial governor." "Evidence that disappeared the night he was killed," Hannah guessed, resuming her work on his arm. "Yes, but not completely." Isaac managed a small, satisfied smile. "Thomas was smarter than they gave him credit for. He kept duplicates hidden in your cellar, behind a loose stone in the foundation. Mrs. Rivera knew where to look." Hope surged in Hannah's chest. "You found them?" Isaac nodded, reaching carefully into his vest pocket with his good arm. He withdrew a folded packet of papers, slightly damp from the rain but intact. "It's all here, proof of their corruption, witness accounts, even a statement from Thomas about threats Wilcox made against him." Hannah stared at the papers, scarcely daring to believe. "This could clear my name." "That's not all," Isaac continued. "While I was there, I learned something else. One of the miners Thomas had extended credit to, man named Harmon, was in the Mercantile the night of the murder. Claims he saw Jensen shoot Thomas, then plant evidence to frame you." "A witness?" Hannah whispered, hardly daring to hope. "He was afraid to come forward at first. Wilcox has a way of making problems disappear. But I convinced him to sign a statement." Isaac tapped the papers. "It's included here." "How did you get shot?" Hannah asked, beginning to bandage his cleaned wound. Isaac's expression darkened. "Jensen spotted me leaving town with Mrs. Rivera's help, got suspicious, followed, and recognized me from asking questions. Started shooting before I could explain myself, so I returned fire and got away." He paused, then added quietly, "Don't think he'll be a problem anymore." Hannah understood his meaning. "You killed him?" "Didn't have much choice," Isaac replied grimly. "It was him or me, and I had these papers to deliver." He watched as she finished bandaging his arm. "You have a gentle touch." "I've had practice," Hannah said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the tumult of emotions inside her. Relief at the evidence, grief refreshed by details of Thomas's murder, fear at the thought of Isaac facing danger on her behalf. Thomas was always getting cuts and scrapes at the store. An awkward silence fell between them, broken only when James began to fuss from his makeshift cradle. Hannah moved to tend to him, lifting him into her arms with practiced ease. "What happens now?" she asked, returning to sit across from Isaac. "We can't exactly walk into the marshal's office with these papers." Isaac sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "There's a federal judge due in Yuma next week for the circuit court. Honest man, from what I hear. We take the evidence to him, get a proper investigation started." "And Wilcox?" "Won't know we're coming until it's too late." Isaac's confidence was reassuring. "Once the judge sees this evidence, Wilcox will be the one running, not you." Hannah looked down at James, now contentedly playing with a button on her dress. "It seems too simple after everything that's happened." "Not saying it'll be easy," Isaac cautioned, "but it's a chance for justice, for Thomas, and for you." The mention of her husband sent a pang through Hannah's heart. For weeks she had been focused solely on survival, pushing her grief aside. Now, faced with the possibility of clearing her name, she found herself confronting the reality of her loss anew. "Thomas was a good man," she said softly. "He deserved better than this." Isaac's expression softened with compassion. "Tell me about him?" The question surprised her. No one had asked her about Thomas since his death. There had been no opportunity for remembrance or tribute. Now, sitting in the warm cabin with the rain falling steadily outside, Hannah found herself wanting to share. "He was kind," she began, memories flooding back. Always ready with a smile for everyone who came into the store, whether they could pay or not. He taught at the Sunday school, knew every child in town by name. She smiled sadly. He was so excited when James was born. Had all these plans for teaching him to fish, to ride. Isaac listened attentively, asking occasional questions that showed genuine interest. As Hannah spoke, she felt some of the tightness in her chest easing. This wasn't forgetting Thomas, it was honoring his memory, keeping him alive in the stories she told. The evening deepened around them, the rain continuing its steady rhythm on the roof. Isaac added wood to the fire and prepared a simple supper while Hannah tended to James. There was a comfortable domesticity to their movements around the small cabin, as if they had been sharing this space for years instead of days. After they had eaten and James was settled for the night, Isaac and Hannah sat by the fire, the evidence papers spread between them as they planned their next steps. They would leave for Yuma in 2 days, giving Isaac's arm time to heal and allowing them to prepare adequately for the journey. "You should take the bed," Hannah insisted when Isaac began to rise to return to his lean-to. "You're injured, and it's still pouring out there." "I'll be fine on the floor by the fire," Isaac countered, but Hannah could see the weariness in his face, the pain he was trying to hide. "Don't be foolish," she said firmly. "You've ridden for days and been shot. Take the bed. James and I will manage on the blankets here." Isaac looked ready to argue further, but finally nodded. His exhaustion winning out. "Just for tonight, and only because arguing with you seems like a losing proposition." A smile tugged at Hannah's lips. "You're learning quickly." As Hannah arranged blankets near the fire for herself and James, she was acutely aware of Isaac moving about the cabin, removing his boots and gun belt before settling on the bed with a barely suppressed groan of relief. "Good night, Hannah," he said softly as she extinguished the lamp, leaving only the firelight to illuminate the cabin. "Good night, Isaac," she replied, curling protectively around James's sleeping form. "And thank you for everything." His only answer was a soft murmur, sleep already claiming him. Hannah lay awake longer, watching the firelight play across the cabin's rough-hewn walls, thinking about the strange turns her life had taken. A month ago, she had been a respected shopkeeper's wife. Then she became a widow, a fugitive. And now, what? A woman with hope restored, perhaps, thanks to the unexpected kindness of a stranger who was quickly becoming something more. The thought startled her. What was Isaac becoming to her? A friend, certainly. A protector. But there was something else stirring within her when she looked at him, something she wasn't ready to name or acknowledge, not with Thomas so recently in his grave. With these unsettling thoughts swirling in her mind, Hannah finally drifted into a fitful sleep, the rain's steady patter a soothing counterpoint to her troubled dreams. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having passed during the night. Hannah woke to find Isaac already up, his injured arm moving stiffly as he stoked the fire and put coffee on to boil. "You should be resting," she admonished, rising carefully so as not to wake James. "Been resting since dawn," Isaac replied with a small smile. "Not used to staying abed once the sun's up." Hannah smoothed her rumpled dress, suddenly conscious of her disheveled appearance. "Let me check your wound, at least." Isaac submitted to her examination without protest. The bullet graze looked better this morning, still angry and red, but clean, with no signs of infection. Hannah applied a fresh bandage, aware of the warmth of his skin beneath her fingers, the steady rhythm of his breathing. "Should heal clean," she pronounced, stepping back perhaps more quickly than necessary. "Still, you should avoid using that arm too much today." "Yes, madam," Isaac replied with a hint of teasing in his voice, "though there's work needs doing if we're to leave tomorrow. Horses to check, provisions to pack." "I can help with that," Hannah offered. "I'm not entirely useless around a homestead." Isaac's expression softened. "Never thought you were." They spent the day in productive companionship, preparing for their journey to Yuma. Isaac checked and repaired tack while Hannah inventoried their food supplies and packed clothing for herself and James. The baby seemed to thrive in the peaceful setting, content to watch their activities from a blanket spread in the shade of the cabin's porch. By evening, they were nearly ready. The horses had been fed and groomed, saddlebags packed, and the cabin prepared for their absence. Over supper, they discussed their approach for presenting the evidence to the judge. "Best if I speak first," Isaac suggested. "Establish the facts before revealing your presence. Once the judge understands the situation, you can come forward with your account." Hannah nodded, grateful for his strategic thinking. "And if Wilcox has sent word to Yuma about me?" "Possible," Isaac acknowledged, "but Judge Harmon is known for forming his own opinions, and once he sees this evidence—" He gestured to the packet of papers, now securely stored in a waterproof pouch. "Well, let's just say Wilcox's word won't count for much." Hannah wanted to believe him, but fear still gnawed at her. What if it's not enough? What if— "Hannah," Isaac interrupted gently, reaching across the table to cover her hand with his, "one step at a time. We have solid evidence in a witness statement. That's more than most get in seeking justice out here." His touch was warm, reassuring. Hannah found herself turning her hand to clasp his briefly before withdrawing. "You're right. I'm letting fear get the better of me." "Natural enough," Isaac said, his eyes holding hers. "You've been through hell these past weeks. But you're not alone anymore." The simple statement struck Hannah deeply. Not alone. After weeks of running, of looking over her shoulder, of having only James to rely on, she now had an ally. More than that, she had someone who believed in her, who was risking his own safety to help her. "Thank you," she said softly, the words inadequate for the depth of her gratitude. Isaac just nodded, seeming to understand all she wasn't saying. Later, as Hannah prepared James for bed, she found herself humming a lullaby that Thomas had often sung to the baby. The familiar melody brought memories washing back Thomas, cradling newborn James, his face alight with wonder. Thomas pacing the floor with a colicky infant, while Hannah caught a few hours' sleep. Thomas making silly faces to coax James's first smiles. Grief squeezed her heart, but it was different now, less raw somehow. She could remember Thomas with love rather than just aching loss. Perhaps that was the first small step toward healing. "He would be grateful to you," Hannah said quietly to Isaac, who was checking the priming on his revolver nearby. "Thomas, I mean, for helping us." Isaac looked up, his expression serious. "Just doing what any decent man would do." "No," Hannah countered. "Most men would have ridden on, not wanting to involve themselves in a stranger's troubles. You're different." Isaac seemed uncomfortable with her praise. Got my own reasons for standing against men like Wilcox, he said after a moment. Told you about my pa. You did, Hannah acknowledged, but that doesn't diminish what you're doing for us now. She hesitated, then added, James and I owe you a debt we can never repay. There's no debt between friends, Isaac replied, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a moment, something unspoken hung in the air between them, something that went beyond friendship or gratitude. Then, James fussed, breaking the moment. Hannah turned her attention back to the baby, aware of her quickened pulse and the warmth in her cheeks. What was happening to her? It was too soon, surely, to be feeling this way about another man. As if sensing her confusion, Isaac stood, collecting his gun and hat. Think I'll check the horses one last time before turning in, he said, his voice carefully neutral. We've got an early start tomorrow. Hannah nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She watched him leave, then pressed a hand to her flushed cheek. Oh, Thomas, she whispered to the quiet room. What am I doing? No answer came, only James's soft babbling as he played with his toes. Hannah sighed, settling the baby for sleep while trying to order her chaotic thoughts. Tomorrow they would ride for Yuma, seeking justice for Thomas. That had to be her focus, not these confusing feelings for Isaac. Yet as she prepared for bed herself, Hannah couldn't help glancing toward the door, waiting for Isaac's return. When he finally came in, their eyes met briefly before he looked away, moving to spread his bedroll near the fire. Good night, Hannah, he said softly, his back to her as he settled on the floor. Good night, Isaac, she replied, turning to face the wall, acutely aware of his presence across the small cabin. Sleep was a long time coming for them both. The journey to Yuma was tense but uneventful. They rode steadily, stopping only when necessary for James's sake. Isaac remained vigilant, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon, his hand never far from his revolver. Hannah, too, found herself watching for danger, all too aware of what was at stake. They reached Yuma late on the second day, the town's buildings silhouetted against the setting sun. Isaac led them to a small hotel on the outskirts, rather than risking the more popular establishments in town. Wait here, he instructed Hannah as they dismounted in the hotel's stable yard. Let me secure rooms before you come in with James. Less chance of being noticed that way. Hannah nodded, cradling a sleeping James against her shoulder while Isaac went inside. He returned shortly, relief evident in his expression. Got us adjoining rooms at the back, he reported in a low voice. Owner didn't ask questions, just took my money. Judge Harmon's due to arrive tomorrow morning, according to the clerk. The rooms were plain but clean, with a connecting door between them. Hannah settled James on one of the beds, then turned to find Isaac watching them with an unreadable expression. Get some rest, he said, his voice gruff. I'll go see about some supper for us. Alone with James, Hannah took the opportunity to wash away the trail dust and change into her one clean dress, a simple blue calico she had mended carefully during their stay at Isaac's cabin. She brushed her hair until it shone, then braided it neatly, feeling oddly self-conscious about her appearance. When Isaac returned with a tray of food, he paused in the doorway, his eyes taking in her transformed appearance. You look, he began, then stopped, clearing his throat. Supper's not much, I'm afraid. Best the hotel kitchen could manage. Hannah smiled, touched by his awkwardness. It smells wonderful after trail rations. They ate together in her room, keeping their voices low as they finalized their plan for the morning. Judge Harmon would be holding court in the town hall, and Isaac would approach him during the mid-morning recess, when fewer people would be present. You and James should stay here until I send word it's safe, Isaac advised. If something goes wrong, if I don't come back. He hesitated. There's money in my saddlebag, enough to get you to California. Don't talk like that, Hannah said sharply. Nothing's going to go wrong. Isaac's smile didn't reach his eyes. Just being practical. After he'd gone to his own room, Hannah sat by the window for a long time, watching the stars appear over Yuma's scattered buildings. So much depended on tomorrow, her future, James's future, justice for Thomas. And Isaac. What role would he play in their lives once this was over? The thought of parting from him brought an unexpected ache to her heart. In the short time she had known him, Isaac had become important to her in ways she was only beginning to understand. His quiet strength, his principles, his kindness toward James all had worked their way past her defenses. "It's too soon," she whispered to herself. "Too soon to feel this way." Yet the feelings persisted, undeniable and growing stronger by the day. Morning came with a knock on the connecting door. Hannah, already dressed and ready, opened it to find Isaac looking grim but determined in a clean shirt, his gun belt polished. "Judge arrived an hour ago," he reported. "Court's in session now. I'll head over in a bit, try to catch him during recess." Hannah nodded, fighting against the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. "Be careful, Isaac." His expression softened as he looked at her. "Always am." He glanced at James, happily playing on the bed. "Look after him. I'll be back as soon as I can." With that, he was gone, his footsteps fading down the hotel corridor. Hannah closed the door behind him, then leaned against it, sending up a silent prayer for his safety and success. The hours that followed were among the longest of Hannah's life. She paced the small room, picked James up and set him down again, tried to read from the Bible she had found in the bedside drawer, all while listening intently for Isaac's return. When the knock finally came, Hannah rushed to the door, then hesitated, caution reasserting itself. "Who is it?" she called softly. "Isaac." His voice was steady, revealing nothing. She opened the door to find him standing there, his expression unreadable. "What happened?" she asked, fear clutching at her heart. "Did you see the judge?" Isaac stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. "He wants to see you, now. He's reviewing the evidence and he believes it warrants a full investigation." Relief made Hannah's knees buckle. Isaac caught her arm, steadying her. "It's not over yet," he cautioned, "but it's a good start. The judge has already sent a telegram to the territorial marshal requesting deputies to arrest Wilcox." Hannah pressed a hand to her mouth, tears threatening. "I never thought. I'd given up hope of anyone believing me." "I believed you," Isaac said simply. Their eyes met, and Hannah felt that unspoken connection again stronger now, impossible to ignore. On impulse, she stepped forward and embraced him, her arms going around his waist, her face pressed against his chest. After a moment of surprise, Isaac's arms encircled her, holding her gently. "Thank you," she whispered against his shirt, "for everything." His hand came up to stroke her hair once, then he stepped back, his expression carefully controlled. "We should go. The judge is waiting." Hannah gathered James in her shawl, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear, hope, and something else, something that had to do with the man beside her rather than the justice they sought. Judge Harmon proved to be a stern-faced man with piercing gray eyes that seemed to look straight through pretense to the truth beneath. He listened attentively as Hannah recounted the events surrounding Thomas's murder and her subsequent flight, interrupting only occasionally to clarify a detail. When she had finished, the judge studied the evidence papers again, his expression grave. "Mrs. Keller, based on this evidence in Mr. Mackley's account, I believe a grave miscarriage of justice was set in motion in Thornfield. I've sent for the territorial marshal to pursue Sheriff Wilcox and investigate this matter thoroughly." "What does that mean for my situation, Your Honor?" Hannah asked, holding James close for comfort. "It means," the judge said, "that while I cannot immediately clear your name, I can issue an order preventing any action against you pending the investigation's outcome." He looked at her directly. "You will remain here in Yuma, available to the court as needed, but you need not fear arrest." It wasn't complete exoneration, but it was more than Hannah had dared hope for. "Thank you, Your Honor," Judge Harmon nodded, then turned his attention to Isaac. "Mr. Mackley, your actions in this matter are commendable. Few men would have taken such risks for a stranger." Isaac shifted uncomfortably under the praise. "Just did what seemed right, Judge." "Indeed." The judge's penetrating gaze moved between Isaac and Hannah, noting perhaps more than either wished to reveal. The court appreciates your assistance. You'll both be called to testify when Wilcox is apprehended. With that, they were dismissed. Hannah walked beside Isaac through Yuma's dusty streets, James cradled in her arms, feeling lightheaded with relief and lingering fear. "What happens now?" she asked as they approached the hotel. Isaac considered the question carefully. "We wait for the marshal to bring in Wilcox. Could be days, could be weeks." He glanced at her. "You'll need a place to stay. Work to support yourself and James." Hannah nodded, the practical concerns beginning to assert themselves now that immediate danger had passed. "I can sew, keep accounts. Perhaps there's a shop in town that needs help." "Or," Isaac said slowly, not meeting her eyes, "you could come back to my place. Just until this is settled," he added quickly. "It's safer there, more comfortable for James than a hotel room. And I'd be around to keep watch, just in case." Hannah studied his profile, trying to read his intentions. Was this merely practical consideration, or was there more to his offer? And what did she want it to be? "That's very kind," she began carefully, "but I wouldn't want to impose further." "It's no imposition," Isaac interrupted. "Place feels empty with just me, truth be told." He finally looked at her directly. "But it's your decision, Hannah. No pressure either way." In that moment, looking into his earnest blue eyes, Hannah made her choice. "We'd be grateful to accept your offer. For now, at least." The relief that crossed Isaac's face told her it had been more than just a practical suggestion on his part. "Good," he said simply. "We can head back tomorrow if you're up for the ride." That evening, as they shared another simple meal in Hannah's hotel room, the atmosphere between them had changed. The immediate danger was past, the pursuit of justice begun, and now they faced the question of what came next for each of them, and perhaps for them together. James, oblivious to the adult complexities around him, happily gummed a piece of bread, occasionally offering a soggy bit to Isaac, who accepted with exaggerated gratitude, making the baby giggle. "He's taken to you," Hannah observed, watching their interaction with a soft smile. Isaac glanced up, something vulnerable in his expression. "He's a fine boy. You should be proud." "I am," Hannah replied, "though I worry about raising him without a father." The words hung in the air between them, laden with unspoken possibilities. Isaac set down his cup carefully, his eyes meeting hers across the table. "Hannah," he began, his voice low, "I don't want to speak out of turn or disrespect Thomas's memory. It's too soon, I know that. But I want you to know." He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "These past weeks, getting to know you and James, it's meant something to me. Something I wasn't expecting to find out here." Hannah felt her heart quicken, both fearful and hopeful at what might come next. "It's meant something to me too," she admitted softly. Isaac nodded, encouragement in his eyes. "I'm not asking for anything now, just a chance maybe, when the time is right, to see if there might be something worth building between us." It was both less and more than Hannah had anticipated, less pressure, more promise. A seed planted that might, with care and time, grow into something beautiful. "I'd like that," she whispered, surprising herself with the truth of it. "When the time is right." Isaac's smile then was like sunrise, breaking across the plains, warm, bright with promise, illuminating possibilities she had thought forever lost to her. Hannah found herself smiling back, a weight lifting from her heart. Whatever came next, justice, a new beginning, perhaps eventually love, she would face it with hope rather than fear. Morning found them loading their few possessions onto the horses, preparing for the journey back to Isaac's homestead. The hotel owner provided them with extra provisions, and Isaac purchased a sturdy hat for Hannah to protect her from the sun. "Suits you," he commented as she tried it on, his admiring gaze bringing color to her cheeks. They left Yuma as the town was coming to life, riding north with James securely nestled in a sling across Hannah's chest. The journey seemed different now, not a flight from danger, but a journey toward possibility. They talked more freely, sharing stories of their pasts, learning each other's histories. Isaac spoke of his childhood in Texas, his father's wrongful hanging, and his mother's determination to carry on afterward. Hannah told him about growing up in Kansas, meeting Thomas when he came to her town as a young merchant's apprentice, their courtship and marriage. "He sounds like he was a good man," Isaac said when she described Thomas's kindness to the miners and their families during hard times. "He was," Hannah agreed, surprised to find she could speak of Thomas now with fondness rather than just pain. "He would want me and James to be happy, to be safe." Isaac nodded, understanding in his eyes. That's what any good man would want for those he loved. They made camp that night beside a small stream, the stars brilliant in the clear desert sky. After James was settled for the night, Hannah sat beside Isaac near the fire, comfortable in the silence that had developed between them. "Judge said it could be weeks before Wilcox is caught and tried," Isaac remarked eventually. "You sure you're all right with staying at my place that long?" Hannah considered the question carefully. "I think so. It feels right somehow. For now, at least." She glanced at him. "Unless you're having second thoughts about the arrangement?" "No," Isaac said quickly, then smiled at his own eagerness. "No, I'm glad to have you both there. Just wanted to make sure you were comfortable with it." Hannah nodded, then found herself asking a question that had been on her mind. "Your homestead, it seems like you're building something meant to last. Do you plan to stay there permanently?" Isaac poked at the fire with a stick, considering his answer. "Been drifting most of my life, after Ma passed. Never found a place that felt worth putting down roots. Then I came across that little valley, with the creek and the good soil, and something just felt right." He glanced at her. "First time I felt that way about a place." "And now?" Hannah pressed gently. "Does it still feel right?" His eyes held hers steadily. More so than ever. The journey back to Isaac's homestead took slightly longer than their ride to Yuma, as they traveled at a gentler pace for James's sake. By the time they crested the final ridge overlooking Isaac's property, Hannah felt a surprising sense of homecoming at the sight of the small cabin nestled in its sheltered valley. "Good to be back," Isaac commented, his own relief evident as they rode down the slope. Everything was as they had left it, the garden still thriving, the horses in the corral nickering a welcome to their returning stablemates. Inside, the cabin was undisturbed, though a fine layer of dust had settled on the furniture during their absence. They fell into a comfortable routine over the following days. Isaac tended the livestock and worked on improvements to the property, while Hannah kept the cabin, cared for James, and helped with the garden. In the evenings, they would sit together by the fire, sometimes talking, sometimes reading, often simply enjoying each other's company in peaceful silence. 2 weeks after their return, a rider appeared on the ridge, a deputy marshal from Yuma, bearing news. Wilcox had been captured trying to flee to Mexico and was now in custody awaiting trial. Judge Harmon requested their presence in Yuma the following week to give testimony. "It's really happening," Hannah said that night as they sat by the fire, James already asleep in the small crib Isaac had crafted for him. "I might finally be cleared." "You will be," Isaac assured her, his faith unwavering. "The evidence is too strong for any other outcome." Hannah nodded, though anxiety still gnawed at her. And afterward? What then? It was the question that had been hovering unspoken between them, what would happen once justice was served and Hannah was free to choose her path forward. Isaac set aside the knife he'd been using to carve a small wooden horse for James. "That depends on you, Hannah." His voice was steady, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "You could still go to California, start fresh there, or—" He hesitated. "Or," she prompted softly. "Or you could stay," Isaac finished, his eyes meeting hers directly. "Here, with me, if that's something you might want." Hannah's heart raced at the simple offer that contained so much meaning. "Is that what you want, Isaac?" "Yes," he answered without hesitation. "These past weeks, having you and James here, it's felt right, Hannah, like this place was waiting for you both all along." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. I know it hasn't been long since Thomas, and I'd never rush you. But I care for you, Hannah. For James, too. And I believe we could build something good here, together. Tears pricked at Hannah's eyes, not of grief but of unexpected joy. I care for you too, Isaac, more than I thought possible after Thomas. She reached for his hand, twining their fingers together. I don't know if I'm ready for everything that might mean yet, but I want to stay, to see where this path leads us. The smile that illuminated Isaac's face was worth any uncertainty the future might hold. He raised their joined hands to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. That's all I'm asking for. A chance. The trial of Sheriff Wilcox was the talk of Yuma when Hannah and Isaac arrived the following week. They had left James in the care of a reliable woman Isaac knew in town, not wanting to expose the baby to the courthouse atmosphere. Hannah sat straight-backed in the witness chair, her voice clear and steady as she recounted the events surrounding Thomas's murder and her flight from Thornfield. Across the courtroom, Wilcox glared at her with undisguised hatred, but she refused to be intimidated. Isaac's supportive presence in the gallery gave her strength. When the prosecution presented Thomas's hidden evidence, a murmur ran through the crowded courtroom. Document after document detailed Wilcox's corruption, culminating in the witness statement from the miner who had seen Deputy Jensen shoot Thomas. By the trial's end, there was little doubt of the outcome. Judge Harmon not only found Wilcox guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and numerous corruption charges, but also formally cleared Hannah of any suspicion in her husband's death. The court offers its sincere apologies for the injustice you have suffered, Mrs. Keller, the judge stated, his stern face showing rare compassion. While nothing can restore what you have lost, it is the hope of this court that today's verdict offers some measure of peace. Hannah left the courthouse with Isaac beside her, her steps lighter than they had been in months. It's over, she said wonderingly as they walked through Yuma's streets. Really over, Isaac squeezed her hand gently. Justice for Thomas and freedom for you and James to move forward. They collected James from his temporary caretaker and prepared for the journey home for Hannah, now thought of Isaac's homestead as home, at least for the present. The 3-day ride back was filled with a new sense of possibility. With the shadow of accusation lifted from her, Hannah could look to the future with hope rather than fear. She watched Isaac with James, noting the tenderness in the strong cowboy's hands as he held the baby, the patience in his voice as he pointed out desert creatures and plants to the wide-eyed child. He'll need a father, Hannah remarked that evening as they made camp, watching Isaac rock James to sleep. Someone to teach him to be a good man. Isaac looked up, surprise and hope mingling in his expression. Are you saying? Hannah moved to sit beside him, her hand coming to rest on his arm. I'm saying I'm grateful every day for the way you've cared for us, and I'm saying that whatever this is between us, it feels real, Isaac, worth exploring. She met his gaze steadily. If that's still what you want. It is, Isaac assured her, his voice husky with emotion. More than anything. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative a beginning rather than a culmination. Hannah felt the solid strength of Isaac's hand cupping her cheek, the warmth of his breath against her lips, and knew with sudden certainty that this was right. Not a replacement for what she had lost with Thomas, but something new and precious in its own right. They returned to the homestead with renewed purpose, working together to improve the small property that was becoming their shared home. Isaac expanded the garden, built a proper chicken coop, and began planning a larger cabin for their growing family. Hannah set up a small schoolroom in one corner of the cabin, determined that James would have education despite their remote location. As summer faded into fall, their feelings deepened and clarified. Isaac courted Hannah properly, with small gifts and gestures that showed his thoughtfulness, wildflowers gathered during his rides, a hand-carved comb for her hair, patience and understanding when memories of Thomas brought moments of melancholy. On a crisp October evening, with the first frost silvering the grass outside, Isaac knelt before Hannah as she sat by the fire with James on her lap. "I've come to love you, Hannah Keller," he said simply, his blue eyes steady on hers. "You and James both. I want to be a husband to you, a father to him, to build a life here, together." He held out a simple gold band. "Will you marry me?" Hannah felt tears well in her eyes as she looked from the ring to the man before her, this good, honorable man who had risked everything to help a desperate widow and her child, who had offered them safety, justice, and now a future. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, Isaac." James, as if understanding the significance of the moment, reached out a chubby hand to touch Isaac's cheek. Isaac laughed, gathering both Hannah and the baby into his embrace, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "Family," he murmured against Hannah's hair. "At last." They were married 2 weeks later by the traveling minister who visited the scattered homesteads in the territory every few months. It was a simple ceremony, attended by the few neighbors within riding distance and the friends they had made in Yuma. Hannah wore a new dress of soft blue calico, with James proudly carried in Isaac's arms as they spoke their vows. That night, after James was asleep in his crib, Hannah and Isaac came together as husband and wife, their love expressed in tender touches and whispered words of commitment. Hannah had feared this moment might be shadowed by memories of Thomas, but instead she found only joy in Isaac's gentle strength and devoted care. "I never thought I'd find this again," she confessed as they lay together afterward, her head pillowed on Isaac's chest. "After Thomas died, I thought that part of my life was over." Isaac stroked her hair, his touch reverent. "Sometimes life gives second chances when we least expect them." "Do you ever regret it?" Hannah asked, raising herself on one elbow to look into his face. "Getting involved in our troubles? It could have cost you everything." Isaac shook his head, his eyes steady on hers. "Not for a moment. The day I found you by that creek, it was the luckiest day of my life, though I didn't know it then." Winter settled over the homestead, bringing shorter days and long evenings spent by the fire. Isaac continued his improvements to the property whenever weather permitted, while Hannah made their cabin a true home, adding small touches of beauty and comfort. James thrived under their shared care, taking his first unassisted steps across the cabin floor on a snowy December afternoon, his face alight with triumph as he tottered from Hannah to Isaac's waiting arms. "That's it, son," Isaac encouraged, his voice warm with pride. "You've got it." The casual endearment brought happy tears to Hannah's eyes. Isaac had embraced fatherhood with the same quiet dedication he brought to everything, patiently teaching James, comforting him through illnesses, celebrating each small milestone. As winter gave way to spring, Hannah discovered she was expecting their first child together. Isaac's response to the news was everything she could have hoped for: joy, mingled with tender concern for her well-being, his hand reverent on her still flat stomach. "Another little one," he marveled, his smile brilliant in the morning light. "James will have a brother or sister." "Are you happy?" Hannah asked, though his expression left little doubt. Isaac gathered her into his arms, his kiss leaving her breathless. "Happier than I ever thought possible," he assured her. The months that followed were busy ones. Isaac completed the new, larger cabin before summer's heat arrived, with proper bedrooms, a living area, and even glass windows ordered all the way from San Francisco. Hannah planted flower beds alongside the vegetable garden, determined that beauty would flourish alongside practicality in their home. James grew from baby to toddler, his vocabulary expanding daily, his curiosity about the world around him insatiable. He followed Isaac everywhere, solemnly imitating the tall cowboy's walk, attempting to help with chores in his small way. "Dad," he called Isaac one evening as they returned from checking the horses, the simple word causing Isaac to stop in his tracks, emotion washing over his face. "That's right, James," Hannah said from the porch where she sat shelling peas, her growing belly now obvious beneath her apron. "That's your da." Isaac scooped the boy up, tossing him gently into the air to James's delighted squeals. "That's right, partner. I'm your da." He glanced at Hannah, his eyes communicating all the love and gratitude he felt for this family they had created together. Summer passed into early fall, and Hannah's time grew near. Isaac became increasingly protective, hiring a young man from a neighboring homestead to help with the heavier work so he could remain closer to home. He'd arranged for the midwife from the nearest settlement to stay with them for the final weeks, unwilling to take chances with Hannah or the baby's health. When labor began on a cool September evening, Isaac proved himself a steady presence, following the midwife's instructions without question, supporting Hannah through each contraction, whispering words of encouragement and love. Their daughter was born just before dawn, her lusty cries filling the cabin as the midwife placed her in Hannah's tired arms. "She's perfect," Hannah whispered, counting tiny fingers and toes, marveling at the dark hair that promised to match Isaac's color. "Just like her mother," Isaac agreed, his voice thick with emotion as he sat on the bed's edge, one arm around Hannah, the other gently touching their daughter's cheek. "What shall we name her?" Hannah looked from their newborn daughter to James, who had been allowed in to meet his sister and now stood beside the bed, his eyes wide with wonder. "Hope," she said softly. "Her name is Hope." Isaac nodded, understanding all that the name represented not just for their daughter, but for the journey that had brought them together, the second chances they had found in each other, the future they were building. That evening, as Hannah rested with baby Hope beside her, Isaac brought James to sit by the fire, the toddler drowsy but fighting sleep as he often did. Hannah watched through half-closed eyes as Isaac told James a story, his deep voice gentle, one large hand stroking the boy's hair. Eventually, James succumbed to sleep, his small body relaxed trustingly against Isaac's chest. Hope, too, slept peacefully beside Hannah, her tiny face serene. The firelight bathed the cabin in a warm glow, illuminating the life they had built from such unlikely beginnings. A desperate widow, a solitary cowboy, a fatherless baby, now a family bound by love and choice rather than just blood. Isaac looked up, meeting Hannah's gaze across the room. The love in his eyes made her heart swell with gratitude and joy. Carefully, so as not to disturb James, he rose and carried the sleeping boy to Hannah's bedside. "Her baby slept beside the fire," he whispered, looking from James to Hope with an expression of wonder and profound contentment. "Family at last." Hannah reached for his hand, drawing him down for a tender kiss. "Not just at last," she murmured against his lips, "but forever." Outside, the desert stars glittered in the vast Arizona sky. Witness to the love that had blossomed against all odds in this small homestead, a love born of courage, nurtured by kindness, and promising a future bright with hope.